Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of the spaceship. His breath made small clouds on the glass as he stared at the massive structure floating in the darkness ahead. Proxima Station looked like a giant wheel spinning, slowly in space, but something was wrong. Very wrong. The station should have been bright with thousands of lights. Ships should have been coming and going from its docking bays. Radio signals should have been filling the air with chatter from 50,000 people living and working inside. Instead, there was only silence. Cold, terrible silence. "Commander Morrison, you need to see this," Amy Carter said from behind. Her voice shook a little. Amy was tough, had been through 3 deep space missions, but Jake could hear fear in her words. Jake turned away from the window and walked to where Amy stood next to a computer screen. The numbers and graphs on the display made no sense. According to the sensors, Proxima Station had been torn apart from the inside. The metal walls were bent and twisted in ways that should have been impossible. How can hull damage look like this? Jake asked, pointing at the strange patterns on the screen. "It's like something grabbed the metal and squeezed it like clay." Amy shook her head. "I've never seen anything like it, sir. The computer keeps giving error messages. It says the damage patterns are impossible." Dr. Kevin Walsh looked up from his own workstation across the bridge. Kevin was a small man with thick glasses who studied alien life forms. He had been quiet for most of the 3-month journey to Alpha Centauri, but now his face was pale with worry. "Commander, I think you should hear the last transmission from the station," Kevin said. His fingers moved over the controls, and suddenly the bridge filled with the sound of screaming. The voice that came through the speakers was broken and full of terror. "This is Proxima Station calling any Earthship. Something has awakened on the planet's surface. The colonists are changing. Their minds are being filled with memories that aren't their own. We don't know how much longer we can hold out. If anyone receives this message, stay away from Proxima B. Whatever you do, don't land on the planet. The caves there contain something that should have stayed buried forever." The transmission ended with the sound of metal being torn apart and a voice screaming words in a language that didn't sound human. Jake felt his stomach twist into knots. He had commanded ships for 15 years, had seen asteroid storms and equipment failures that killed good people. But this was different. This felt like something out of a nightmare. "When did we receive this signal?" he asked. 3 months ago, Kevin replied. "Right before we left Earth orbit." The message was repeated 12 times over 6 hours, then nothing. Complete radio silence. Jake walked back to the observation window. The U-East horizon was now close enough that he could see the docking bays of Proxima Station. They were empty except for twisted pieces of metal floating in space. Some of the debris looked like it had once been spaceships, but the shapes were all wrong, as if they had been melted and reformed by invisible hands. "Sir, we're getting close enough to dock," called out Tommy Peterson from the pilot's seat. Tommy was young, maybe 25, and this was his first mission beyond the solar system. His hands shook as he worked the controls. "Take us in slow," Jake ordered. "Amy, I want constant scans of the station. If anything moves, anything at all, I want to know about it immediately." "Yes, sir," Amy replied, but her voice was barely above a whisper dot as the horizon approached the station's main docking bay. Jake could see more of the damage. The outer hull of the station was covered in strange marks, like claw scratches made by something impossibly large. Some of the marks seemed to glow with a faint blue light that hurt to look at directly. "Kevin, have you ever seen anything like those markings?" Jake asked. Kevin adjusted his glasses and studied the hull through a telescope. "No, sir, but they don't look random. There's a pattern to them, almost like writing, like someone or something was trying to communicate. The docking process should have been automatic." Proxima Station's computers should have guided them in, locked onto their ship, and pressurized the docking bay. Instead, Tommy had to fly the ship manually, using only his eyes and skill to line up with the empty docking port. "Docking complete," Tommy announced, but his voice cracked on the last word. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Amy was staring at her computer screen, but her hands were shaking. Kevin was cleaning his glasses over and over again, a nervous habit he had when he was scared. Tommy was gripping the flight controls so hard his knuckles were white. "Listen to me," Jake said, in his strongest command voice. "We're going to board that station, and we're going to find out what happened to those people. Maybe there are survivors hiding somewhere. Maybe the life support systems are still working in some sections. We won't know until we look. What if whatever killed them is still there?" Amy asked. Jake didn't have a good answer for that question. The truth was, he was just as scared as the rest of them. But 50,000 people had lived on that station. They had families back on Earth who deserved to know what happened to them. "We'll be careful," Jake said. "Full environmental suits. Weapons ready, constant radio contact. Nobody goes anywhere alone." It took them 2 hours to prepare for boarding. They checked their air supplies 3 times, tested their communication equipment, and made sure their weapons were loaded. Jake had never expected to need weapons on a rescue mission, but the twisted metal and strange markings on the station's hull told him that normal rules didn't apply here. The airlock connecting their ship to the station opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Jake stepped through first, his boots making loud clanging sounds on the metal floor. The corridor beyond was dark, except for the beams of their flashlights. "Temperature is minus 40 degrees, Amy reported through the radio. "Life support has been offline for months." They moved slowly through the empty corridors of Proxima Station. Their flashlight beams revealed rooms that looked like they had been abandoned in a hurry. Meals sat half-eaten on tables, covered with frost. Personal belongings were scattered on the floor as if people had dropped them while running, but there were no bodies. 50,000 people should have left behind some trace, but the station was empty, as if everyone had simply vanished into thin air. "Commander, I'm picking up a faint energy signature from the lower levels," Kevin reported. "Something is still active down there." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Could be emergency power, or maybe some survivors in a safe room. They found an elevator shaft and rappelled down on safety lines. The lower levels of the station were even colder and darker than the upper sections. Here, the walls showed more of the strange claw marks, and some of them seemed to pulse with that same blue light. "This is impossible," Kevin whispered. "These marks are warm. They're giving off heat." As they descended deeper into the station, Jake began to hear something that made his blood freeze. It was a sound like whimpering, like a small animal in pain. The sound was coming from the very bottom of the station, from a maintenance area that should have been empty. "There's something alive down there," Amy said, her voice tight with fear. Jake checked his weapon one more time and started toward the sound. Whatever they found in the depths of Proxima Station would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. But he couldn't know that yet. All he knew was that something was waiting for them in the darkness, something that had survived whatever destroyed 50,000 human lives. The whimpering sound grew louder as they approached, and Jake realized it wasn't coming from a human throat. They were about to meet the last survivor of Alpha Centauri, and their lives would never be the same. 3 months earlier, Ryan Brooks wiped sweat from his forehead as he guided his team deeper into the caves of Proxima b. The planet's surface was cold and rocky, but the underground caverns were warm from geothermal heat. Ryan had been leading mining surveys for 8 years, but these caves felt different somehow. "How much deeper do we need to go?" asked Charlie Davis, one of the younger miners. Charlie carried the heavy drilling equipment and was breathing hard. From the climb down, the mineral readings get stronger the deeper we go, Ryan replied, checking his scanner. Command wants us to map at least 5 more levels before we head back to the station. Dr. Lisa Martinez walked beside them, her own equipment beeping softly as it measured the cave walls. Lisa was the smartest person Ryan had ever met, with 3 degrees in archaeology and geology. She had volunteered for the Proxima mission because she wanted to study the first alien planet humans had colonized. "Ryan, look at this," Lisa called out, stopping next to a section of wall that looked different from the rest. "These aren't natural formations." Ryan walked over and shined his flashlight where Lisa was pointing. The cave wall was covered in patterns that looked almost like writing, but not any writing he had ever seen. The marks were carved deep into the rock and seemed to shimmer with their own faint light. "Could be mineral deposits," Charlie suggested, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Lisa ran her fingers along the carved marks. "No, this is definitely artificial. Someone made these marks on purpose, but the rock around them dates back millions of years. That's impossible unless ... Unless what?" Ryan asked. "Unless someone was here before us, long before us." The 3 of them stood in silence, staring at the strange markings. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. Humans were supposed to be the first intelligent life to reach Proxima Centauri. If Lisa was right, then everything they had been told was wrong. "We need to report this to the station," Ryan said finally. "Wait," Lisa said, pulling out a larger scanner from her pack. "Let me get detailed readings first. This could be the most important discovery in human history." She activated the deep penetration scanner, a device that could see through solid rock using high-energy pulses. The machine hummed to life and sent invisible beams deep into the cave wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the carved markings began to glow brighter. "Lisa, turn it off," Charlie said, backing away from the wall. "Something's wrong." But Lisa was staring at her scanner in amazement. "The readings are incredible. There's a huge chamber behind this wall, bigger than anything we've mapped. And there's something in there, something that's giving off its own energy signature." The glow from the markings grew brighter and began to pulse like a heartbeat. Ryan grabbed Lisa's arm and tried to pull her away from the wall, but she shook him off. "Just a few more seconds," she said. "I need to record this data." That's when the ground began to shake. The tremor started small, like a truck driving by overhead. But it quickly grew stronger, until all 3 of them had to grab the cave walls to keep from falling. The carved markings were now bright enough to light up the entire cavern without their flashlights. "We're getting out of here now," Ryan shouted. Over the rumbling sound that filled the cave, they ran toward the cave entrance, stumbling over loose rocks and dodging falling debris. Behind them, the glowing markings pulsed faster and faster, and Ryan could swear he heard something like a voice calling out in a language he didn't understand. They made it to the surface just as the tremors stopped. Ryan immediately called the station on his radio, while Lisa and Charlie caught their breath. "Proxima Station, this is Survey Team 7. We have an emergency situation at the dig site." The voice of Paul Henderson, the colony administrator, came through the static. "What's your status, Ryan?" "We found something down there, Paul. Artificial structures that predate human arrival. When we scanned them, the whole cave system started shaking. We need a full science team down here immediately." There was a long pause before Paul responded. "Are you sure about what you saw? Artificial structures?" "I'm sure. Lisa has the scanner data to prove it. Bring your team back to the station for debriefing. Don't discuss this with anyone else until we know what we're dealing with." At night, Ryan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those glowing markings pulsing like a heartbeat. He kept thinking he could hear that strange voice calling out, even though he was safe in his quarters on the station. He wasn't the only one having trouble sleeping. Over the next few days, reports came in from all over the station. People were having the same nightmare, seeing the same images of strange beings and ancient civilizations. Dr. Nina Foster, the station's chief psychologist, was overwhelmed with patients complaining of disturbed sleep and vivid dreams. "It's probably just stress," Nina told Paul during their morning briefing. "The isolation of deep space can cause shared psychological symptoms in closed communities." But Paul wasn't convinced. The seismic readings from the planet's surface were getting stronger every day, and they followed patterns that looked almost intentional. It was as if something deep in the planet was trying to communicate. "I want round-the-clock monitoring of the cave system," Paul ordered, "and get me a full report on these sleep disturbances. If there's a connection between what happened in the caves and what's happening to our people, I need to know about it." Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the station's geneticist, made a discovery that changed everything. While studying blood samples from people who were having the strange dreams, she found something impossible. Their DNA was changing. "The modifications are subtle," Elizabeth explained to Paul and the senior staff. "But they're definitely there. Sections of genetic code that were dormant are becoming active. It's as if something is awakening parts of human DNA that have been sleeping for millions of years." "What kind of modifications?" Paul asked. "Enhanced neural pathways, increased sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, changes to brain chemistry that would allow for greater empathic abilities. It's like someone designed humans to have these capabilities, but they've been turned off until now." Lisa had been studying the cave markings around the clock since the incident. The more she learned, the more frightened she became. The symbols weren't just random decorations. They told a story, and it was a story that no human had ever heard before. "They're historical records," she told Ryan during one of their late-night research sessions. "The beings who made these markings were recording events that happened millions of years ago. And humans are part of that history." "What do you mean?" Ryan asked. Lisa's hands shook as she showed him her translations. "According to these records, humans didn't evolve on Earth. We came from somewhere else. And when we arrived on Earth, there was already an intelligent species living there. The markings call them the Zarathic." Ryan felt his blood turn cold. "What happened to them?" "That's what scares me," Lisa whispered. "The records show that humans didn't just meet the Zarathic. We destroyed them. Every last one." As the days passed, the nightmares grew stronger and more detailed. People on the station began to remember things that shouldn't have been possible to remember. They saw through the eyes of their ancestors as they hunted down gentle beings who had welcomed them with open arms. The memories were too real to be dreams, too detailed to be imagination. And with each passing night, the truth became harder to deny. Humanity had built its civilization on the bones of another species, a species that had died because they were too kind to defend themselves. Down in the caves, something ancient was waking up, something that had been waiting for millions of years to judge whether humanity deserved to continue existing. The last survivor of a murdered race was stirring from its long sleep, and it remembered everything. Dr. Nina Foster had never seen anything like it in her 20 years as a psychologist. Every day, more people came to her office with the same complaint. They were remembering things that had never happened to them, seeing places they had never been, living through experiences that belonged to someone else. "Tell me about the dream again, Marcus," Nina said to the man sitting across from her desk. Marcus Williams was a maintenance worker, a simple man who fixed broken pipes and faulty air recyclers. He had never been interested in history or archaeology, but now he spoke about ancient civilizations as if he had lived among them. "It's not a dream," Marcus said. his hands shaking as he held his coffee cup. "It feels more real than this room, more real than talking to you right now. I'm standing on a planet with 2 suns in the sky. The grass is purple, and there are these beings everywhere. They're tall and thin, with skin that looks like it's made of light." Nina wrote notes on her tablet, but her own hands were trembling. She had heard this same description from dozens of people over the past week. The details were always identical, down to the color of the alien sky and the way the beings moved like they were floating instead of walking. "What happens next in the memory?" she asked. Marcus closed his eyes, and when he spoke again, his voice was full of pain. "The beings welcome us. They're so happy to see us, like we're long-lost family coming home. They show us their cities, their art, their children. They trust us completely. And then we kill them." Marcus opened his eyes, and Nina could see tears streaming down his cheeks. "We kill every single one of them, and they never fight back. They could have stopped us, but they chose to die instead of hurting anyone." Nina had heard this same story from every person who came to see her. The memories were so vivid and consistent that she was starting to believe they might be real. But that was impossible. Humans had evolved on Earth. Everyone knew that down in the engineering section, Carlos Rodriguez was having his own crisis. Carlos had been working on the station's power core when the memories hit him like a physical blow. One moment he was adjusting plasma flow regulators, and the next he was somewhere else entirely. He saw himself standing in a beautiful city made of crystal and light. The buildings grew from the ground like trees, and the air itself seemed to sing with gentle music. The beings who lived there came out to greet him, their faces full of joy and welcome. "We have waited so long for you to return," one of them said in a voice like wind chimes. "We prepared this place for you, made it perfect for your kind to live and grow." But Carlos knew what was going to happen next. He could feel the hunger inside himself, the desire to take and destroy. He watched in horror as his own hands reached for a weapon, as his own voice gave orders to attack the defenseless beings. "No," Carlos whispered, back in the engineering bay. "This isn't real. This can't be real." But the memories felt more true than anything else in his life. He could smell the alien air, feel the warmth of their twin suns on his skin, hear the dying cries of beings who had loved him even as he murdered them. Bobby Adams, the station's security chief, found Carlos sitting on the floor of the engineering bay, crying like a child. Bobby had been patrolling the corridors when he heard the sound of sobbing coming from behind the power core. "Carlos, what's wrong?" Bobby asked, kneeling down beside the engineer. "We're monsters," Carlos whispered. "We've always been monsters, and we didn't even know it." Bobby helped Carlos to his feet and guided him to a chair. Over the past week, Bobby had seen more grown men and women crying than in his entire 20-year career in security. Whatever was happening to the colonists was getting worse. "Tell me what you saw," Bobby said gently. "The memories, Bobby, they're not dreams or hallucinations. They're real memories from our ancestors. Humans didn't evolve on Earth. We came from somewhere else, and when we got to Earth, there were already people living there. Good people, peaceful people." Bobby felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to them?" "We killed them all. Every man, woman, and child. They welcomed us with open arms, and we slaughtered them because we could." That night, Bobby couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same images that Carlos had described. He was part of a human army marching through cities of crystal and light, leaving nothing but death behind them. The beings they were killing were beautiful beyond description. They had faces like works of art and voices that could make anyone feel loved and accepted. They possessed incredible powers, could move objects with their thoughts, and heal wounds with a touch, but they never used those powers to defend themselves. Why? Won't you fight back? Bobby heard himself ask one of the dying beings. Because violence destroys the soul, the creature replied with its last breath. We would rather die as we lived, with love in our hearts, than become killers like you. In her laboratory, Dr. Elizabeth Harper was studying blood samples and genetic sequences, trying to understand what was happening to the colonists. The changes to their DNA were accelerating, and new abilities were starting to manifest. Look. At this, Elizabeth said to her assistant, Janet Cole. She pointed to a computer screen showing brain scans. The test subjects are developing enhanced empathic abilities. They can sense the emotions of people around them, sometimes even read surface thoughts. Is that what's causing the shared memories? Janet asked. I think the memories are unlocking. The abilities, not the other way around, Elizabeth replied. It's as if the genetic modifications were put there on purpose, programmed to activate when humans were ready to face the truth about their past. Put there by who? Elizabeth pulled up another screen, showing genetic analysis. By the species. We destroyed the Zarathic. Before they died, they modified human DNA. They gave us the capacity for empathy and compassion, hoping that someday we would evolve beyond our violent nature. They changed us even as we were killing them? It's the ultimate act of forgiveness, Elizabeth said quietly. They knew they were going to die, but they still tried to save us from ourselves. In his office, Administrator Paul Henderson was receiving reports from all over the station. The psychological breakdown was accelerating. People were refusing to eat, unable to function, while carrying the weight of ancestral guilt. Others had become violent, angry at their own nature, and taking it out on anyone nearby. Sir, we need to evacuate the station, urged Dr. Foster during their emergency meeting. The colonists are in no condition to maintain life support systems or basic safety protocols. Evacuate to where? Paul asked. Earth is 4 years away at maximum speed. We don't have the resources for that kind of journey. Then we need to find a way to stop these memories, Dr. Harper suggested. Maybe if we can shut down whatever is broadcasting them from the planet's surface. But Paul had been having the memories, too, and he knew they couldn't be stopped. The truth was too powerful, too fundamental to who humans really were. The Zarathic had planted the seeds of their own justice in human DNA, and now those seeds were growing into something that would change humanity forever. There's something else, Dr. Harper said reluctantly. The genetic changes aren't just affecting brain chemistry. Some colonists are developing physical changes too. Enhanced reflexes, improved healing, increased resistance to radiation. You're saying we're evolving? I'm saying we're becoming what the Zarathic intended us to become. They didn't just give us the capacity for empathy. They gave us the tools to become better than we were. Paul looked out his office window at the planet below. Somewhere in those caves, something was waiting. The last survivor of the Zarathic, the final witness to humanity's greatest crime. And that being was judging whether humans deserved the gift they had been given. The station shook with another tremor from the planet's surface. The awakening was almost complete, and soon they would face the consequences of their ancestors' actions. The changes began slowly at first. Maria Santos, a teacher in the station school, noticed that she could sense her students' emotions without them saying a word. When little Jimmy Parker was sad about missing his parents back on Earth, Maria felt the sadness in her own heart, as if it were her own feeling. Mrs. Santos, how did you know I was upset? Jimmy asked after she gave him a hug without him asking for one. Maria didn't know how to answer. She had just felt his pain calling out to her like a voice in her mind, but that was impossible. People couldn't read each other's thoughts. I just noticed you looked sad, she said, But she knew it was more than that dot down in the agricultural section. Helen Webb was discovering that her connection to the plants had grown stronger. She could feel when the crops needed water or nutrients, could sense disease in the leaves before any symptoms appeared. Her harvest yields had increased by 40% in just 2 weeks. "It's like they're talking to me," Helen told her supervisor, Frank Miller. "I know that sounds crazy, but I can feel what they need." Frank had been having his own strange experiences. His hands had started glowing with a soft blue light when he worked with injured plants, and somehow his touch could heal damaged roots and stems. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, but the evidence was right there in front of him. "Maybe we're both going crazy," Frank said, but he didn't believe it. The genetic changes were accelerating across the entire station. Dr. Elizabeth Harper worked around the clock, trying to document and understand what was happening to the colonists. Her laboratory had become a medical center as people came to her with new abilities they couldn't explain. "My reflexes are getting faster," reported maintenance worker Roy Jackson. "Yesterday, I caught a falling wrench without even looking at it. My hand just moved on its own. I can see heat patterns through walls," said Security Officer Linda Gray. "And I can hear conversations from 3 rooms away. I haven't slept in 4 days, but I feel completely rested," added Engineer Tony Clark. "It's like my body doesn't need sleep anymore." Elizabeth documented each case, but she knew she was witnessing something unprecedented in human history. The Zarathic modifications weren't just giving humans empathic abilities. They were transforming them into something more than human. But not everyone was handling the changes well. The weight of the ancestral memories was crushing some people's minds. Dr. Foster found 3 colonists in the observation deck, staring out at space with blank expressions. "We don't deserve to live," whispered Janet Davis, tears streaming down her face. "How can we go on knowing what our ancestors did?" "They trusted us," said Peter Wilson, rocking back and forth in his chair. "They loved us like family, and we butchered them for fun." Nina tried to comfort them, but she was struggling with her own guilt. The memories showed her that humans hadn't killed the Zarathic for resources or territory. They had done it for pleasure, for the simple joy of destroying something beautiful. "We can't change what happened in the past," Nina said, "but we can choose what we do now. Can we?" asked Janet. "Or are we just born killers pretending to be civilized?" The question haunted everyone on the station. Were the enhanced abilities a gift or a curse? Were they evolving into something better, or were they just becoming more efficient predators? Steve Johnson, a mining foreman, had been one of the first to develop the new abilities. He could move objects with his mind and see through solid walls. But instead of using these powers to help others, he became obsessed with the idea that humans were fundamentally evil. "We're parasites," Steve declared during a heated argument in the cafeteria. "We consume everything we touch and leave nothing but death behind us. The Zarathic should have killed us when they had the chance." "That's not who we are now," argued Maria Santos. "We can choose to be different." "Different?" Steve laughed bitterly. "Look around you. We're turning into the very beings we murdered. We're becoming them so we can kill them all over again." The argument escalated into violence when Steve used his new abilities to throw chairs across the room. Other colonists with enhanced strength tried to stop him, and soon the cafeteria was filled with people using powers they barely understood. Administrator Paul Henderson arrived with security to break up the fight, but he could see that the situation was spiraling out of control. The colony was splitting into 2 groups. One side believed the changes were a chance for humanity to redeem itself. The other side thought humans were irredeemably evil and should be destroyed. "We need to make a decision," Paul told his senior staff during an emergency meeting. "Either we find a way to reverse these changes, or we accept them and try to maintain order. We can't reverse them, Dr. Harper said. The genetic modifications are too deeply integrated into our DNA. They're becoming a permanent part of human evolution. Then we need to learn to control them, Paul decided. We'll set up training programs, establish protocols for using these abilities safely. But even as he spoke, Paul knew it might be too late. The tremors from the planet's surface were getting stronger, and the source of the changes was still down there in the caves, waiting. That night, the most powerful psychic event yet occurred. Every person on the station experienced the same vision simultaneously. They saw the last moments of the Zarathic civilization, felt the final thoughts of a dying species. The vision showed them Zaxthil, the last surviving Zarathic, using the final moments of their species' existence to plant the seeds of redemption in human DNA. Even as their people were being slaughtered, Zaxthil chose love over revenge. Our children will know peace, Zaxthil had said as they went into suspended animation deep in the caves of what would become Proxima B. When the time comes, they will choose compassion over violence. This is our gift to the universe. When the vision ended, the colonists were left with a terrible understanding. They weren't just carrying the guilt of their ancestors' crimes. They were the children Zaxthil had spoken of, the ones meant to redeem humanity's sins. But redemption required choice, and not everyone was ready to make that choice. We have to go down to the caves, Maria Santos announced to the assembled colonists. We have to face the last Zarathic and prove that we're worthy of the gifts they gave us. Or we could destroy it, Steve Johnson countered. End this madness before it spreads to the rest of humanity. The colony was now divided into two clear factions. The Redeemers, led by Maria, believed they could prove humanity had evolved beyond its violent nature. The Purists, led by Steve, thought the only way to save humanity was to eliminate all traces of alien influence. We vote, Paul declared. Democracy decides our course of action. The vote was close, but the Redeemers won by a narrow margin. They would descend to the caves and face Zaxthil, the last witness to humanity's greatest crime. As they prepared for the journey, systems throughout the station began to fail. The psychological stress and infighting had taken their toll on essential maintenance. Life support was failing, communications were down, and the station's orbit was beginning to decay. We're running out of time, Dr. Harper warned. If we don't stabilize the station's system soon, we'll all die regardless of what we decide about the alien. The final test was approaching. Humanity would either prove itself worthy of redemption or face the consequences of its ancestors' sins. And deep in the caves below, Zaxthil waited to render judgment on the species that had destroyed everything they had ever loved. The descent into the caves took 6 hours. Maria Santos led a team of 12 volunteers down through the twisted passages toward the source of the psychic emanations. The walls around them pulsed with that strange blue light, growing brighter. With each step they took deeper into the planet. The energy readings are off the charts, reported Dr. Harper, checking her scanner with shaking hands. Whatever's down there is incredibly powerful. Behind them, Steve Johnson followed with his own group of purists. They carried weapons designed to disrupt alien technology, determined to destroy whatever they found before it could influence the rest of humanity. This is insane, muttered Bobby Adams, who had reluctantly joined Maria's group. We're walking into the lair of a being that could probably kill us all with a thought. Maybe, Maria replied, but we have to try. The Zarathic gave us these abilities for a reason. If we're going to honor their sacrifice, we need to prove we can be better than our ancestors. The cave opened into a vast chamber that took their breath away. The walls were covered in the same glowing markings they had seen before, but here they moved and shifted like living things. In the center of the chamber stood something that barely looked real. Zaxthol was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of pure light. The being's features constantly shifted between solid and translucent, as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. When it spoke, its voice filled their minds without using sound. "So you have come at last," Zaxthol said, and the words carried the weight of millions of years of sorrow. "The children of the killers, carrying the gifts we gave you in our final moments." Maria stepped forward, fighting the urge to fall to her knees. The presence of this ancient being was overwhelming, like standing next to a star. "We know what our ancestors did to your people. We came to ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness?" Zaxthel's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "You seek forgiveness for crimes you did not commit?" "We carry their DNA," Maria said. "Their memories, their capacity for violence. We want to prove that we can be different." Behind her, Steve Johnson raised his weapon. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're making us weak, alien. Humans don't bow down to anyone." Zaxthol turned its attention to Steve, and suddenly, the man was frozen in place. "I remember your ancestor," the being said sadly. "He was the one who killed my bondmate. She died trying to heal a human child who had been injured in your attack." Steve struggled against the invisible force holding him, his face red with anger. "We don't need your pity. Humans are strong because we take what we want. Strength?" Zaxthel's form grew brighter. "You call the slaughter of innocents strength? Your ancestors were cowards who could only feel powerful by destroying those who could not fight back." Suddenly, everyone in the chamber was experiencing the same vision. They saw the final days of the Zarathic civilization through Zaxthel's own memories. The aliens had possessed incredible technology and abilities that could have easily defeated the human invaders, but their nature prevented them from causing harm to any intelligent life. "We could have stopped you," Zaxthel explained, as the visions played out around them. "We could have sent you back to your dying world or erased you from existence with a thought. But that would have made us like you, and we chose to remain who we were." Dr. Harper watched in amazement as the memories showed Zarathic scientists working frantically to modify human DNA, even as their cities burned around them. "You changed us while we were killing you." "Why?" "Because we saw potential in you," Zaxthel replied. "Buried deep beneath the violence and hatred, we sensed something that could grow into compassion. We planted the seeds hoping that someday, when you were ready, you would choose love over fear." "And if we're not ready?" asked Carlos Rodriguez, who had been silent until now. Zaxthel's form darkened. "Then I will send a signal across the galaxy, warning every intelligent species about humanity's true nature. Your expansion into space will end, and you will remain trapped in your solar system until you destroy yourselves or learn to change." The weight of that threat settled over everyone in the chamber. Humanity's future among the stars depended on what happened in the next few minutes. "What do you want from us?" Maria asked. "I want you to choose," Zaxthel said. "Right here, right now. Will you embrace the gifts we gave you and dedicate your lives to protecting and nurturing life? Or will you remain the destroyers your ancestors were?" Steve Johnson broke free from the psychic hold and raised his weapon again. "I choose to remain human. We don't need alien modifications to make us worthy." But before he could fire, Maria stepped between them. "Steve, stop. This isn't about being human or alien. It's about being better than we were." "Get out of my way," Steve snarled. "This thing is going to make us weak and passive like its people were." "The Zarathic weren't weak," Dr. Harper said, understanding flooding through her. "They were strong, enough to choose love even when they were being murdered. That takes more courage than any violence ever could." Around the chamber, the other colonists were making their own choices. Some sided with Steve, believing that accepting alien modifications would somehow make them less human. But more stood with Maria, recognizing that the Zarathic gifts weren't changing their humanity. They were fulfilling it. "I spent my whole life fixing things," said maintenance worker Roy Jackson. "If these abilities let me fix more things, help more people, then I accept them. I can feel the pain of every living thing around me now," added teacher Helen Webb. "That doesn't make me less human. It makes me more responsible for the world we create." One by one, the colonists declared their choice. In the end, only 3 people sided with Steve Johnson's rejection of the alien gifts. The rest embraced their new abilities and the responsibility that came with them. Zack still watched this with what might have been hope. "You surprise me. I expected more to choose the path of violence." "Maybe that's the change you were hoping for," Maria said. "Maybe each generation gets a little better at choosing love over fear." "Perhaps," Zack still agreed. "But choice is not enough. You must prove your commitment through action." "What do you want us to do?" "Return to Earth. Share what you have learned. Help your species understand what they truly are and what they could become. Some will reject the truth, but others will embrace it. And slowly, generation by generation, humanity will evolve into something worthy of the stars. And if we fail, then your children will face the same test, and their children after them, until humanity either learns to choose compassion or destroys itself, trying to remain unchanged." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Zack still gave them one final gift. "You will live longer than normal humans, and your enhanced abilities will pass to your children. But remember, these gifts come with the obligation to protect life wherever you find it." The journey back to the surface took most of the day. When they reached Proxima Station, they found it in chaos. The system's failures had accelerated, and the station's orbit was decaying rapidly. They had perhaps days before the structure broke apart completely. "We need to evacuate immediately," Paul Henderson announced. "The transport ships can't carry everyone, but we can save most of the colonists." As they prepared to abandon Proxima Station, Maria looked back at the planet where Zack still waited in the caves. The last Zarathic would remain there, watching and hoping that humanity would prove worthy of the second chance they had been given. The survivors who made it back to Earth carried with them the truth about humanity's past and the promise of a better future. Some people rejected their story, but others listened and began to change. And slowly, very slowly, humanity began to evolve into something the Zarathic would have been proud to call their children.